I learned a couple of years ago, we were trying to merge and sell some other stuff and whatnot. And we learned like, oh man, I was keeping track of this the first couple of years, but somewhere in the middle, I got so busy, so many people changed around. I'm like, where's the SOPs? Where did we put this? And when we got to selling it and they audited it, I was like, okay, I gotta go back to doing it this way.
Like Alan said, no matter which way we look at it, whether it's built for legacy or built to exit, you're going to hand the business off to somebody.
You want to hand a clean business.
Hand something that's clean.
Definitely living in the information age. And I think, for any business, whether you're building for legacy, because obviously legacy can be interpreted in so many ways, right?
Yeah.
But whether you're building for legacy or you're building to exit, I think the one thing we can all agree on is that you have to have a plan.
Yes.
Right? And you have to not just have that plan, but you have to formalize the plan. What's going on, beautiful people? Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Grind.
BTG.
Hey, if this is your first time, thank you so much for tuning in. And please make sure to hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any of our future content. Our podcast is about business and lifestyle. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. My name is Kay.
I'm Alan.
I'm Tosin. And today we're going to be talking about whether when you go into business, should you build to exit or you should build for legacy?
That's a good question.
So why I wanted us to start talking about this conversation is because we know out there, you've probably even seen it on social media. They're calling it the silver tsunami. There's a bunch of business owners that are getting to retirement age or have passed retirement age.
Those are baby boomers, right?
Yeah, baby boomers. And they're trying to sell their businesses or exit their businesses or transition it to the next generation. However, there's not that many of them that will transition to the next generation. I think if I remembered correctly, one of our producers gave me like an 80% fact and said that, hey, about 80% of businesses won't have somebody to transition to or it's even to sell to.
Wow.
So really quickly, like what age range is the baby boomers, just for audience who might not know what that is? Is it?
When were they born, right?
I think
50s to 60s,
late
right?
60s and
Yeah,
I think it's like late 50s to 60s, no?
Yes.
Or is it
So
still 70s?
they would be, how old would they be right now?
They'll be like 69.
Somebody with a calculator.
70.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So let's say
y'all can
60s
fact
and
check that
up.
stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So, which is retirement age, right? Because most people, when they think about retirement, it's going to be 60 years old, right? So 60 and up, that's the retirement age. You've got a business. You've been running it for a while, but now you're trying to exit. So my question up front was, hey, you know what? For those of us that still have a few years to get there, whenever we're thinking about business, whether we're in a business today or we're going to start a business, should we be, or what do you guys think? Should we build to exit and sell it? Or should we build for some kind of legacy play?
I guess it's all about what's valuable to you, right? But for folks that are watching out there, I think it's good to really understand if you're building to exit, what does that look like versus if you're building, for long-term success, right? So if you're building to exit, which a lot of startup nowadays, that's what they do. The intent is really about, scaling as quickly as possible, right? So you're looking at the valuation of your company. Why? Because you want it to look attractive, right? You're essentially positioning yourself for profitability, right? So you want to make sure that, your books, everything, bless you. You want to make sure that your book looks clean, everything is attractive, right? So that's that. Now, when you think about building for legacy, it's usually family run type of business, right? So, which in this case, every decision that you're making now is not necessarily for profitability, but you're thinking long term, right?
Yeah.
And then also, usually business like that, they're usually community rooted, because they want their customers to know, like, hey, we're not just a business. We care about the community. We're here to serve you. So from that angle, right? Now, I was reading a stat during the week that says that over 12 million businesses in America are baby boomers,
Yeah.
and they don't have a succession plan, which is quite alarming to me, because what that tells me is that imagine you work your entire life on a business, you don't sell, and you don't pass it on to a family
just
member.
dissipates.
And it just disappears.
I mean, I think let's talk about that a little bit, because there are many businesses that I term as jobs, actually. But I mean, in the true nature of it, it's a business. You
Yep.
registered a business, whether it's a sole proprietorship, LLC, partnership, corporation,
Can you give us an
whatever.
example of one?
Well, I don't want to bring down. Oh, actually, I have a good one. I can bring these people down. All right. So let's say like you're an IT consultant, because I got a lot of IT people around me, right?
Yeah.
They've got businesses. They're doing what they call corp to corp nowadays. That
Right.
means they have their own business and they are contracting themselves to another business.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right. So that's the corp to corp thing. Right. But it's them that's providing the solutions, right?
Unless
they
they
don't
scaled
have
it.
employees.
Right,
They
unless
don't
they
have, it's
scaled it,
just
yeah.
them. So once that contract ends, that contract ends. Right. So it's a business in term, but it's not a business that can have a legacy,
Right.
so to speak.
It could
Or-
if it's a father-son or a father-daughter or whatever, mother.
well, now
son.
you'll have to start scaling it
Right.
instead of that solopreneur.
Yeah.
Doing all the work. You are the business, so it's your business is a job, really. So I think we have to. I think inside that statistic, maybe there needs to be a little bit more research, but I think we need to actually break that piece out, because I feel there are a bunch of businesses that are actually jobs. So
Right.
you won't be able to transition those.
They're solopreneurs. So
Yeah.
I think that with the question initially whether to exit or build for legacy, like you said, they're community business. They're more local businesses that are going to be legacies when you start out.
Yeah.
Because I think that question of whether it's for legacy or for exit, you don't know half the time. You're just like, I want to make this money. You're not, most people don't think that far ahead unless it's a local business.
Yeah.
Then sometimes they're like, I'm going to build this, healthcare practice or the CPA or whatever, if it's local. And then hopefully my kids can do that. And even if they don't do that, they will be able to run it and hire the appropriate, and I'll teach them the ropes. But then that also, if your kids aren't old enough to know what they want to do when you start the business, then it's like, Dad, I want to be an architect. Well, okay.
That's one thing.
So, or now you got to find a family member or somebody, or maybe even a friend to take under your wing if you don't plan on transitioning. So I think the biggest thing is like a lot of the entrepreneurs out there aren't thinking, unless it's real estate or some kind of brick and mortar, they're not thinking legacy. Cause typically, like you said, when people do a startup, they're trying to scale quickly, sell it and exit and go on catch flights, right? It's not feelings.
Yeah. And I think that I like what you said, right? Especially about the family. I think one of the biggest problem is that, we assume that our kids
Want to follow in our
are going to
footsteps.
follow in our footsteps, right?
Yeah.
Or we assume that somebody internal, like that's working with us, is
Right.
going to follow. It's going to take the business and keep it going. But we never formalize it.
Right.
It's and what's that?
And
plan about-
they may love your business too, but the grit and all the stuff you did do to maintain it hardcore, they may not just have that desire. They're like,
Yeah.
I like my role here.
Exactly.
I don't want to do the ownership
Exactly. And what do we always say here? Like, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail.
Yeah.
So I think when you're thinking about it from that angle, for me, and this is just my opinion, I would always build to exit. Why? Because it keeps me honest.
Right.
When I say it keeps me honest, what that means is, even if I can't have somebody internal or a child to take over, guess what? Because I've been building it in a certain way, by the time I want to retire,
The books are clean.
I can still exit.
Right.
Well,
I agree with that.
Well, let's
'Cause
dive into that
well,
point, right?
I was
Is there, when do you know the right time to exit? Because when you want to exit is maybe not the right time to exit. So if you're building to exit,
That's
You usually have a plan, a date, right? When you usually have Like I have a
But
friend
let's say,
who
I want
I
to
have a 5-year plan, right? But you can't exit because COVID happened, right?
Okay.
Now you got to push.
You got one.
Now your 5-year plan is a 7-year plan,
Or maybe a 20-year plan.
Or maybe you're like, should have sold in December.
Yeah.
When I had that offer.
Now you get what I'm
It could be
saying.
somebody came knocking on my door, and maybe I value my company at $10 million. They say,
Right.
hey, I'll give you $20 million for this company. At that point,
That's time to
I can
sell.
go create a whole nother legacy.
But some people they think.
I wish somebody would do that.
But no,
You can knock on my door
So
anytime.
with that being said, sometimes that makes you think because you can't foresee the future of COVID or any extenuating circumstances, right? But when they offer you, okay, say like your exit plan was $2 million, right? They see more in your business and offer you $4 million. You sell for $4 million. Fast forward 5 years, it's like $100 billion company.
guess what?
And you don't know that.
No.
I'm saying, but either you have two choices when you get the offer. He thinks it's worth $4 million. Well, maybe I need to reevaluate. Maybe there's something here
Not
that I can.
necessarily.
No, I'm saying that's what you should do. You still may end up selling, but you should take serious consideration of, okay, how will I feel if I could have done more? Will I be okay with that? If the answer is, if I don't, it could have been more and I sold for less and I'm okay with that, then sell, exit. If you feel like, no, I feel like I got more to do and you feel that way, then don't exit. But you also have to then ask yourself, how will I feel if in the future it goes down more?
Well,
It has to be two sides to the coin that you have to be okay with in either direction.
But one thing I'm always telling folks, at least what folks don't typically consider is, let me give this example. Instagram. When Meta bought Instagram,
Right.
they paid $1 billion, right? Now we know Instagram is worth a whole lot more, right?
But they put a lot into it, so.
So let's say I own Instagram and they approach me and they say, hey, we'll give you $1 billion for your company. Now, what people don't realize is the company that's offering to pay you all this money, the type of resources that they have to get that company to $100
You may not be able to do it on your own.
Pause. But you're talking a grand scale. Let's bring it down to
but what you
let's
said-
bring it out to 2 mil versus,
but the
4
key-
mil.
what-
But you
but the-
could have scaled it to 20.
But
Maybe. You don't know.
I don't
You don't
know.
know.
That's
But
why I
what
say
I'm
you got to
saying.
have that conversation and evaluate. Can I scale it a little bit better?
Or you guys are missing out one other point. If somebody is buying you, what about you putting a little equity and own a little piece?
Yes.
So that you can still enjoy
If
the
you
potential.
if they allow you.
No, I mean, that's what Instagram did.
No, I know.
It's all negotiation. It's all negotiation.
Sometimes they don't give you equity. They just pay you.
No, but
they give you a profit share.
If you're gonna sell, put it in.
Yeah, no,
negotiate.
I know,
You
but
know?
then they walk away sometimes because that's not what their vision
just
is.
because of my
you can't be
2
scared to
cents.
negotiate.
No.
it's my small
I'm not saying being scared to negotiate. I'm saying they may say that's cute. You have a right negotiation. That's cute. You think we want you on here? We'll give you some profit share based on performance if you sustain business while we transition in for the next 3 years. They do it all the time in my industry.
And then we
they're
want
like,
you
yeah,
out."
buddy.
Yeah.
But if it dips, you don't get the increase either. You just get because they pay you in installments every year.
I see what you
And
mean.
then say
Sometimes-
like you sell for $1 million, they pay you like 25% the first in the beginning. Then you work the year. If everything stays the same, they pay you the 25%. If it goes up, you get a percentage of that. And every year for 3 years or whatever. So that's how they do it. And then they're like, okay, bye, buddy.
Okay.
We already transitioned it the
Let's
way
look
we
at it
want.
from here. You own a dental practice, right?
Right.
And you own a CPA firm.
Yeah.
Because I want both of y'all to answer this. Are you building to exit or are you building for legacy?
I'm building the exit. Building to exit should always, if you're building for legacy, you're by default building to exit. That's how I feel. Because your thing, when you're,
Somebody gonna exit you.
no.
Whether your children or whatever.
No.
That's
No,
legacy,
like,
right?
No. What I'm trying to say is that when you hand off something for a legacy, right? It should be very clean and put together. You don't want to hand them. I think when people build for legacy, they do a lot of things in-house and don't replace themselves, right?
Yeah.
So exactly, they do all these decisions. When you're going to build for exit, right? You have to make it so somebody else can run this business even without you.
That's right.
And that it's good. So if you're building for legacy, like you said, you're always building to exit. So it has to be clean books, clean everything good, running processes running well by itself. So if you get to build, if you're building it for a legacy, you get to the end and your kid changes their mind, or whoever is like internally is like, you know what? I used to want to be a dentist. Nah, I don't want to do that. I want to be a painter now. Like, oh my God. And then, you know, yes, you might have some connection to it, an emotional connection, because it might break your heart. But you're at least not stuck like, oh, I didn't replace me. I thought you were going to replace me. I don't know how to, you know.
You know what I was just thinking?
What?
When you are a Nigerian, you're only expected for
careers.
For career. Doctor,
lawyer,
engineer. And what's the last one?
What are we missing?
Accountant.
I think they allowed accountants in there.
No. You're allowed to be a pro athlete.
No.
You're not allowed.
Nowadays.
No. You're not allowed. No. You're mishearing me. You're not allowed to be an athlete. You're only allowed to be a pro athlete.
Yeah.
They don't care about.
So it's just gonna happen overnight.
Yeah, like overnight. Like all of a sudden,
drop
like,
you and you're next to him.
yeah, it's like, oh, look at Kobe. Why can't you be him? Bro, you were tripping about me.
My pastor once mentioned that, you know, if you are running a business and if you have not put things in place for you to not be
present
in the business, then you don't have a business.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
So I want to
You have a
ask
job.
you, are you building to exit or are you building for legacy? And can you kind of walk us through your mindset around it?
I'm a little torn, you know.
Who's the legacy?
That's right. You know, I'm building for legacy, but not like my children legacy.
Your
I'm
companies.
building for a legacy where maybe not too many know this vision about what I have for my firm, but I'm building this legacy where talented minorities can show up and say that, hey, we're just as good as any CPA out there.
Right.
We have the same skills. We have the same level of talent.
Right.
And when we show up, we only bat home runs over it. No, I'm kidding. All right.
We get on
do our
base,
best.
at
We do
least.
our best for you. And it can be comparable to anyone that's out there. That's the true legacy that
Yep.
I wanted to build, or that we are trying to build. And therefore, you know, we've talked over several episodes how we're making sure the managers are CPAs, EAs, those that have MBAs, all that good stuff. Well qualified folks are the ones that are client facing and not just hosting.
Right.
So we're already doing that today. So I would say that's what we're trying to build for. However, that's also another way to build for exit.
Yeah.
Because you've got processes in place.
Exactly.
Correct.
You've got the people in place.
Yeah.
I think you just summed it up in that you're making sure things you're building for your vision, right? Whether it's legacy or exit, the vision is the same.
Yes.
At the end goal, you may decide to stay on longer, but you're building for the legacy of your vision.
Correct.
Which is kind of, I think that's, well, at least that's what I was kind of getting at too.
And that's, well, what we don't want to do is where you get into these businesses where everything is in the head of the owner.
Yes.
Right? They know how, like, they can wake up and fix things and everybody has to rely on them, depend on them, ask them everything. They are pretty much the bottleneck.
Right.
And that type of business, you're not building for anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I know.
You're actually maybe
Firsthand.
building a job.
It's a job.
It's a job, right? If
it's a
everybody's
job.
got
It's
to
a ball
depend
and
on
chain.
So if you're
At the
if you're a
bottom of the ocean.
solopreneur and it's that way, your processes aren't documented. Even if you're a solopreneur, that means you can't even take a break.
Yeah.
Because when you take a break, money stops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and when you come back from vacation, money continues,
I
right?
think he's saying something that's important. It's so hard, but very imperative that your business starts with your vision, but it goes nowhere if you can't scale. And you always, most of the time, need people to scale in most industries. And so if you have good people, empower them and grow them, invest your resources in them. If you have bad eggs, you just got to let them go. I know you got to rip off the Band-Aid. The longer you let it stay there, the longer it can't air dry and heal. Right. So,
and I like that you mentioned that because, obviously not everyone who's watching us are business owners. You know, you got some people that are professionals as well. And I got a quick story to tell y'all. I'm going to expose myself here. A few years ago, I needed to work on a side project. And as I was working on the project, because it was just me, I did everything myself and I did not document anything. But then when the project got to a stage where it was above my skill set, I got on Fiverr and Upwork just to try and get some folks in. And they were asking all these questions. And I got so frustrated to the point that I felt like I might as well just do the whole job myself. Because the vision and the layout and the fundamentals of how I envision
was
everything.
In your head only.
It's in my head.
No one can help you if it's right there.
But that's hard. But that's where you come in.
Right. But I'm saying that to say that even for folks out there that are not necessarily business owners, that same mindset still has to apply in our daily life. You know, how are we, especially if we know that, okay, you always have to ask yourself, like, if I'm not doing this thing, can somebody else step in and get it done? God forbid you're sick and you're in the hospital and this, whatever you're doing still needs to get done. What are you going to do? Right. So like, it really taught me the importance of having some sort of repository in place where systems, how things are being documented, how things are being done, the whole,
even how you make decisions.
Exactly.
Because as an owner, sometimes we see something and you can, do this.
Yeah.
Like the process of you quickly going in your head and figuring out, do this.
Writing it down is the
painful. It should be documented so that somebody else can walk through it and say, do this.
So that was one of the first things we did in our office for, different procedures, right? Instead of saying, we're doing this procedure, so you need this. And I had, staff that I was like, hey, why isn't it set up? I told them a million times, like, no. I literally shut down the whole day. I said every procedure, we're going to put it in a tray. We're not only going to take a picture of it and blow it up like this big, we're going to list items with numbers next to it. So when they come in and I'm like, why didn't you put this together? They're like, oh, I didn't know. You didn't see that big chart next to you setting up? I'm like, go back to the chart and set up. Because I don't want to have to use my brain for things that require, just reading. This is first grade, amount of knowledge to be able to complete these tasks. And I think the hardest thing for most entrepreneurs and anyone is getting this, not just coaching you and coaching them and whatever, but actually getting down on paper, written, so you can be like, okay, here you go. And it's well thought out and explained. And I can't explain and emphasize the importance of bringing it down to the way like you would talk to an elementary school kid. So I honestly feel that way because you may think it's common sense.
Yes.
Not at all. It's common because your mind has been doing it so much.
Yeah.
It's not at all.
I have a story, so I was doing some consulting for my wife.
That should be interesting.
That's always the best way to start stories, right? So my wife is also an entrepreneur, as many of you know out there. And a few years ago, I was like, you got to document your processes. She's like, document what? I got people. They know what they're doing.
It's hard.
I'm like, no, you have to really, listen, when spouses are consulting to each other, you can't be, you have to,
you have to come from the side and kind of like,
your delivery is important.
And you also got to know when to drop it.
Yes, right. Because you still got to sleep it.
I'm like, you know what? I'm like, no. That's not how businesses operate. You've got to be able to document it so that it's repeatable. And that hard. You're not getting angry when somebody doesn't do it one piece of the process. They might do 5 steps, but then you're angry that they didn't do the last 6 steps.
Because you're asking them to memorize.
You got to hear it.
I'm like, have you documented these? All right. So, she's like, no, I don't need to document it. I don't even know how to document it and all that stuff.
It is a lot. It's a lot.
So I let it, I said, oh, okay, no problem. About 2 years later, this is 2 years later, comes to me and says, man, I've been using ChatGPT.
I had the same conversation.
I was like, it was there 2 years ago.
I know, right? So
But it's
I get
okay.
it. Chat
Today
GPT,
she's documented. All right.
it helps. So, oh my God. So quick story. I'm gonna try to keep it short. Went car shopping with my mom, right? Ended up, the person that's supposed to sell me, all of a sudden, I if you're watching, he's a great person. You know, we started having a conversation, talked about a podcast, and he had all these ideas for business and he wanted to start a rental stuff. Anyway, long story short, I told him, I was like, hey, you don't know how to start. And that's most entrepreneurs. You need to just, at first, what is your idea and what do you want to do?
Yeah.
But he doesn't even know the answers to the questions because he hasn't been asked the questions and he doesn't know the questions. You know what I mean? Like, it's like the chicken or the egg. So I did give him the advice of use the talk button on ChatGPT and say, you know, pretend you're an expert advisor, help me get this business plan together. And, you know, ask me questions to probe and find out things my business might be missing. I don't know how to verbalize my business plan. So please find out as much as possible about my business plan so we can make projections.
That's it.
And then he was like, he was like, how does your mind work like that? I'm like, because that's what you need, right?
Yeah.
You just don't know how to prompt ChatGPT.
Yeah, there are tools out there.
He said, I tried to use it. It didn't work. I was like, well, cause he had it already. He had the app. And I said,
Most people have it downloaded. Yeah.
It's, you work in a car dealership, right? A nice, very nice guy. And I was like, it's like a GPS in a car.
Yeah.
You can have it, but then you can't be like, I can't get anywhere because you don't know how to drive. You got to tell the GPS where you want to go.
That's right.
It's not just going to get in the car. And he was like, oh my gosh, I learned so much today. But we're in the age where we have so much AI and technology at our disposal. The issue now is not, are we able to get things done? It's, have you gone and sought out information and know even how to use it?
Yeah.
You have a fleet of, you have so much information. It's like the new Google, right? On roids.
Yeah.
So
we definitely live in an information age. And I think, you know, for any business, you know, whether you're building for legacy, because obviously legacy can be interpreted in so many ways, right?
Yeah.
But whether you're building for legacy or you're building to exit, I think the one thing we can all agree on is that you have to have a plan.
yes.
Right. And you have to not just have that plan, but you have to formalize the plan.
Correct.
Yes.
You know, and within the formalization of the plan, you got to have some backups as well to make sure, like, all right, you know what, if this doesn't work out the way I think it's going to work out, then this will happen. Because at the end of the day, we all don't have kids that are going to want to go into, you know, what we're doing.
Don't bank on that.
But like Alan said, no matter which way we look at it, whether it's built for legacy or built to exit, you're going to hand the business off to somebody.
You want to hand a clean business
Hand something that's clean.
Yes.
Yeah, I got to fix
that's clean.
this. They got to fix so much.
Yeah.
You know, your children, if that's the legacy that you're thinking of, don't want trash.
And also
All
think
right.
about it. God forbid you're not able to hand over the business that your kids do want while you're, you know, before
they're ready.
or you may have expired, God forbid.
Yeah.
You don't want them to go in there and have to start figuring out where this and how does this work. So even I constantly am like, man, I need to make this cleaner. I need to make out time and make this cleaner because
Or even there has to be a caretaker that takes care of the business for a little while before.
something. So I think
there's a
it's
lot of
very
different
good to be clean. You know, I think if I learned a couple of years ago, we were trying to merge and sell some other stuff and whatnot. And we learned like, oh man, I was keeping track of this the first couple of years, but somewhere in the middle, I got so busy. So many people changed around. I'm like, where's the SOPs? Oh, where did we put this? And when we got to selling it and they audited it, I was like, okay, I gotta go back to doing it this way.
Yeah.
So,
and I know
when
when it comes to documentation, I think one of the key things that can help us with that is to, you know, come up with some templates, you know, templates on how you make decisions.
Or even ChatGPT, or any other type of, you know, large language model.
Right.
Actually, one that I learned, maybe we'll have to do an episode on this one, is Notebook LM.
I told you that.
Yeah, you know, like you can
Best
have your
thing on
own
the planet.
internal AI
Right
that
now.
if you pour all of your SOPs and
Yep.
every
You don't even have to.
statement, standard of procedures,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
SOPs.
Standard
if you
operating procedures.
standard operating procedures. Sorry. If you throw all those things in there, then you can like search it and do all kinds of different things,
Yeah.
you know.
You could make
So
it.
there-
You could make a podcast and teach you anything.
Yeah.
Two people
Yeah.
talking. It's
so
pretty
you can
good.
use all those tools, but there are tools out there. So I don't
Yeah.
think there should be a business that's not ready for legacy or for exit.
Yeah.
Get your
no matter
MVP.
what.
The big
As he
eyes.
loves
Then
to say,
the
MVP,
rest
right?
is kind of left to
Exactly.
opportunity,
Exactly.
right? Because there are some businesses, you know, let's use maybe some examples of specialized businesses where there's no one to buy it.
Yeah.
And there's no one to hand it
That
off
happens
to.
a lot.
You know, those are maybe,
Well-
and one example is specialties.
Well, you can
You know.
sell off some of your IPs, right? Maybe customers or whatever, but
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
you're
like
right.
I don't know if I can say this, but I have a client that's like a infectious disease doctor.
Oh yeah, that's so.
I mean, like,
Can't
those
say
are mainly
no.
hospital.
Like,
Yeah.
Is he?
like
Is he?
points
Does he have his own
whatever.
practice?
Yeah.
Oh, that's hard.
I mean,
there's
best thing
not that
you
many.
can do is just maybe write a book or something.
Is that write a book?
Well, anyway, Alan, close us out real quick.
Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or any comments, we appreciate your time. I want you to like, subscribe, follow us.
Yeah.
They don't ever let me close out.
He's like, I'm gonna take my chance.
No, but you know, you can find me at iam.adds. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not used to closing out.
You can find me on One
Instagram,
Horizon.
that's
Where
right.
can I find you, Tosin?
Tosin Amatayo.
Yeah,
Easy.
Instagram. This is our Instagram.
Yeah, this is-
So,
and obviously our main one, Beyond the Grind.
Yeah.
You know. But
Yeah,
until
but-
next time,
till next time, man.
peace.
Peace.